Hey guys, welcome to my very first NFL mock draft for 2023. I've got Pro Football Focus's mock draft simulator pulled up here, and I'm going to go through all 31 first round picks and give you guys some breakdown thoughts and justification for every single player and every single team. If you guys know of a better website to use, let me know. I'll check it out, but I think this is a pretty good one. I am recording this before week 16 in the NFL, so there's 3 weeks left in the regular season, and this draft order is correct as of right now. Right off the top, though, of course, I want to say subscribe to the channel if you're new. I would appreciate it if you left a like on this video. You can find my link tree in the description. It has all my links where you can follow me. I also left timestamps in the description for every pick, so if YouTube isn't showing you guys the different sections, you can find that below and go right to the team you want to see. So one last thing is also, you guys should know that I followed the NFL very closely now for a long time, since probably like 2005, college football too. So I want to hear though from fans of each of these specific teams because I want to know if you guys think my picks are on point or not. So leave those comments down below. I'll be checking those out for sure. Also, real life trades are going to happen, but I won't be predicting any of those here today. There's really no point because it's going to change every single week, the draft order, until someone wins the Super Bowl and then the final order will be set. So this is the current draft order courtesy of tankathon.com. And yeah, let's begin. Number one overall are the 112-1 Houston Texans, and it looks like barring a disaster, the Texans are going to hold on to that number one pick, which means they can get the best player in the draft this year, and that is probably Bryce Young, Alabama's quarterback. To make it simple, I think he's clearly deserving of the number one pick in 2023. Good arm, really accurate, always in control, doesn't turn the ball over much. Basically, a lot of strengths, virtually no weaknesses. 2021 at Bama finished with 47 touchdowns and 7 picks. Won the Heisman, won the SEC after blowing out Georgia, and then in the national championship game against Georgia came up about 40 yards short of beating them for a second time, and that was without his top two wide receivers, who he lost to torn ACLs in Mechie and JMO. So in 2022, that wide receiver group at Bama wasn't nearly as good as it's been the last decade, basically, but still was great. 27 touchdowns, 5 picks this year. Only lost 2 games all year by a total of 4 points, and they were both SEC road games. If I remember correctly, he is the third highest rated commit ever to play at Alabama, and he's definitely lived up to it. He's an incredible player, and the style comparison that I think fits the most for him is actually Patrick Mahomes. That's because they're both pocket passers first, but they also are improvisers, and they both have that X factor. They both scramble around, but they don't really look to run first, really. They sort of just scramble around behind the line of scrimmage, looking for a wide receiver to break free from coverage, and they're excellent at making those plays. Josh Allen does a little bit of that. Caleb Williams does too. I'm not sure how many others I would put in that category though. There's very few of them. Sort of that style is impossible to defend. Layer on top of that the intelligence and all the arm talent, it's just a nightmare to play against that. So the Texans, they can't pass up on a player like this. The only thing I will say about Bryce Young is he's 6 foot 194, which isn't exactly small, but it's smaller than teams would probably like their quarterback to be. As long as he can stay healthy, there won't be any issues. But at the same time, staying healthy goes for all quarterbacks, regardless of size. So there's not much to criticize about him. I think Nick Caserio has to make this pick right here. The Bears have the number 2 overall pick, which I'm sure they will be taking calls about since they don't need a quarterback. They have Justin Fields, so they're in a position where they can just take the best player available, trade back, collect some good picks maybe, which would make sense because actually this roster needs a lot. I think this is actually the worst roster in the NFL. I know it would be weird to pick an edge player here because the Bears just traded away Khalil Mack at the start of free agency, which was in March this year, and Will Anderson plays the same position. He's the best player available. He's a game-wrecking force, so I think this would be an easy pick for them to make because of how much this guy impacts the game. 10 sacks and an interception this year, and he's one of those guys that strikes fear in the opposing team. So we have Will Anderson Jr. from Alabama here going number 2 overall to the Bears. The Seahawks have a decision to make here at number 3 with the pick they got from actually trading Russell Wilson to Denver. If you think about it, Pete Carroll can actually draft their quarterback of the future in this prime spot. I think this would be too good of a chance to pass up on. So despite Geno Smith playing well to start this year, and I think he just made the Pro Bowl, he's not the long-term option. So he's the guy for right now who can win games until they find somebody for that long haul. And I think if you look at the board here, Will Levis is available, but I don't think it's going to be him. I think the Seahawks may take CJ Stroud at number 3. And that's because he's your prototypical pocket passer. He can make every throw on the field, so I think this would be a nice pick for Seattle. You've got DK and Lockett still, Kenneth Walker at running back, etc. In that division too, the NFC West, the 49ers actually have quarterback questions. Cardinals just lost Kyler to a torn ACL, and the Rams have quarterback questions going forward now with Stafford being out all year and potentially retiring. The Seahawks can lock in CJ as their quarterback of the future and have some stability in the long run. The Lions have the Rams pick here at number 4, and I think they need to improve their defense more than anything. The offense can score points. They were number 1 in the league early on in the season, and they do have some talent. J-Mo just came back from his torn ACL, and he can be a real star in this league, I think. Amon-Ra St. Brown has been really good for them the last 2 years. We know Jared Goff is not the long-term answer, but he could return and play another season before the Lions move on. I think quarterback could be an option if they want to maybe sit him for a year, but I think the pick here is going to be Jalen Carter from Georgia. He's just a monster in the middle of the D-line, 6'3", 310, and he's got to be one of the most surefire picks in this first round. Pair him with Aiden Hutchinson, and all of a sudden the Lions have some dudes that can get after quarterbacks. Picking at 5 are the Cardinals, who have been one of the more disappointing teams in 2022. And on top of that, Kyler, like I said, just tore his ACL, so now your quarterback has a long-term injury and recovery ahead of him, which may drag on and affect him next season too. So not a great spot to be in right now, and I'm not sure really actually what direction to go with this pick. I lean towards defense because they got to get better again on that side of the ball in order to contend. You have an offensive coach in Cliff Kingsbury who probably needs to pick it up, but nevertheless is known for that side of the ball. The defense has some pieces, of course, but one of the areas that could use an upgrade is D-line, where you still have JJ Watt, but this isn't the same guy from 10 years ago. He may be there now, but this isn't the future to me. So Miles Murphy makes a lot of sense, and he's a heck of a player too. Pair him up with fellow Clemson Tiger Isaiah Simmons. You got Budda Baker, Byron Murphy, Marco Wilson. Like I said, there's some pieces there. There's a number of ways Arizona could go, but I would want a guy like this on my team. So that rounds out the top 5. Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, Clemson, they make up all 5 picks, just like they usually do in the college football playoff every year. Let's move on to 6 now, where the Colts are on the clock, and this is a franchise who just hasn't been the same since Andrew Luck stepped away. They fired Frank Reich this season and are paying him a fortune over the next few years to basically just go away and not coach them. Replaced him with Jeff Saturday, which I think shocked everybody because he's got no coaching experience. I don't think anyone is convinced by him, and I would say Jim Irsay is kind of a questionable owner. So their quarterbacks the last 3 years have been Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz, and now Matt Ryan. So clearly they need a franchise quarterback because those guys are not getting it done. I think this would be a nice spot for Indy to take a chance on one. And so I think the pick here is going to be Will Levis. He's probably the most controversial player in this first round in terms of how many people think he's good versus how many people think he stinks. And I'm not really sure what he'll be in the NFL because let's not even include Penn State, where he was Sean Clifford's backup. But based on what we've seen at Kentucky, personally, I would say I'm just not convinced by him yet. The pro Levis people will tell you that he's got the physical tools, the big arm, the toughness, and that means he can be Josh Allen. I get all that, but I think I would bet on that we're not looking at the next Josh Allen here. So like I said, I'm undecided as of now, but I do think he'll end up going in the top 10 or so regardless because teams are desperate to find a quarterback, and that means they'll get picked higher than maybe they should. We see that every single year. And that's definitely going to continue because quarterbacks are the most valuable position by far. They touch the ball 60 times a game, so the fortunes of the team heavily rely in their hands, literally. And the philosophy you see around the league is if you don't have one, you keep swinging and trying until you do find one. And that's what I see the Colts doing here. 7th are the Atlanta Falcons, who are another team looking for their future quarterback under head coach Arthur Smith. I think they like Mariota for now, though, and that means they can go ahead and try to find a difference maker. Yes, the defense could use some work, but I think they may go and pick, Bijan Robinson, Texas's running back. This may be a little too high for him, but he is RB1 in this draft, so maybe not. I just think he can come in and become the identity on offense for a team that, look, they can use a running back. If you look at Arthur Smith in Tennessee as well, he had Derrick Henry, and he ran a similar style offense with Tannehill. If you look at Bijan, he's a total stud, can do everything from rushing to receiving, pass blocking. You could build your team around that running game, and I think it would make sense. O-line has some good players on it. It would help out Mariota and play to his strengths if you can run an RPO type of offense. You've got Kyle Pitts and Drake London. You got other running backs. Cordero Patterson, is pretty underrated. So all of a sudden you have three who can contribute on offense. And look, the defense isn't great, but then you got an offense that's run game heavy or run game focused, and that helps you out because that means they're on the field less. That side of the ball, they do have Grady Jarrett, who's a beast, AJ Terrell, and some other dudes. I just think drafting this one guy can positively affect this team so much. So I think it would allow them to establish an identity, and that's huge. So I would do this. All right, the Panthers are picking at number 8. Another team in the NFC South definitely need their quarterback of the future. They have cycled through so many quarterbacks since the end of Cam's time, and it's been a mess, really. Matt Rule was a mess. Getting Sam Darnold didn't make any sense. Then trading for Baker definitely made no sense. This is a team that should have tanked probably a couple years ago and just gotten Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence and been done with it. They wouldn't still be searching. They have a bunch of picks now, though, because they traded away Christian McCaffrey to San Fran, and they kind of got a lot back. And because they've won a couple games this year, they actually aren't in that number 1 pick position like they were a few weeks ago. And so they're number 8, which is the same area they've been in the last 3 drafts. The last 3 they've picked 6th, 7th, and 8th in the first round. And so now here they are in line to pick 8th again. I do think they've got some promise on defense. J.C. Horn looks like a stud. Jeremy Chin, Shaq Thompson, Derek Brown, Brian Burns. On offense, you've got 2 good running backs, I would say. Terrace Marshall plays the X. DJ Moore on the other side is good. And I think if they go ahead and pick, where is he? Jackson Smith and Jigba from Ohio State. Now you've got a guy who is versatile, can play everywhere at wide receiver, but specifically in the slot to complete this offense in terms of running 3 wide receiver sets, 11 personnel, which I think that would be a great fit for Carolina, even though you're leaving quarterback unresolved for now. And Jigba, though, essentially sat out in 2022, but I still think he's probably wide receiver 1 this year. He got hurt in the first quarter of the first game this year against Notre Dame, never returned. So you kind of have to go back to 2021. And he was very impressive. He was the number 1 receiver. Well, I shouldn't say he was the number 3 receiver, but he was the leading receiver on an Ohio State team that had Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, 2 first-round picks who are amazing NFL players as rookies. He was unbelievable in that Rose Bowl, and I hope he doesn't fall in the drafts simply because people forget about him because he's out of sight, out of mind this year. He had 95 catches for 1,595 yards and 9 touchdowns last year. He's a great player, and I think the Panthers would love to get a guy like this at 8. Even though the Eagles have the best record in the NFL this year, they also have a chance to have a top 10 pick as well, thanks to the Saints. So up until very recently, it actually looked like this pick was going to be in the top 5, which is just insane. It's almost unfair that a team could win the Super Bowl potentially and then turn around and make a top 5 pick as well. So this is truly the definition of a luxury pick for Philly. If it was in the top 5, I would argue they could easily trade back and acquire some more draft capital, but they could also stay put and take whatever they need, which obviously isn't a lot. They could look to future-proof some positions that they currently don't really need, like, I don't know, maybe wide receiver. Looking at their free agents, though, this upcoming offseason, they have like 5 D linemen, and then they have Marcus Epps, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, and James Bradbury, all free agents. So D-line or DB makes a lot of sense, and I think Keely Ringo could be the first cornerback taken this year out of Georgia. He's got that size and length that Philly is looking for. Really what every team's looking for these days. 6'2", 210. He's the biggest of all the top corners in this draft, specifically of like the top 6 or so that are projected to go in the first round. So he comes from an incredible defense down at Georgia, and they could plug him right into their defense and keep chugging along as one of the best teams in the league. The last pick in the top 10 is the Raiders, who are another team that people thought would be good this year after they traded for Devontae Adams. Instead, once again, they're kind of a disaster. I thought Josh McDaniels would do well with this offense, but maybe he's just one of those guys that's better as an offensive coordinator, and that's it. I think the Raiders have several good players on this roster, if you look around it, and I think they definitely could use a cornerback, though, especially in the division with Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert. As a Pats fan, I do know that their GM used to be a Patriots scout and then director of player personnel in 2021. They have a bunch of former Pats in this organization, from the GM to McDaniels. They've got Duron Harmon, Jarrett Stidham, Jakob Johnson, Brandon Bolden, Chandler Jones even. I'm sure Dave Ziegler still has some relationships with Coach Saban, and I think they probably still trust that he's producing those NFL-ready type players. So when I look at the board here, I could see the Raiders taking Brian Branch. I think it would make sense, and it fits what Vegas needs right now. I think he's versatile, can play all over the defense. He can be your nickel corner, aka that star position. Having a good player in that spot can make a big difference, and he's got some size, will make a tackle, and yeah, every defense needs a player like this. So I think maybe even down the road, he may end up being the best corner from this draft class. So I think this would be an excellent pick for the Raiders. Jacksonville are at 11, and I'm actually a little surprised how well they're playing as of recent, and they do have a shot to make the playoffs still, just one game behind Tennessee with 3 games left. So we'll see. Basically, everyone on offense has played well this year except for the O-line, even though they did, I guess, improve it from years past. So that's immediately still a spot that jumps out to me that could use some players. Regardless if they go this route or not, they have to improve it because you have to protect Trevor Lawrence, who has been way better this year. So looking at the board, the Jags can have their pick of all the top O-linemen. None of them have been picked thus far, and I think we're really only talking about 3 guys here that could be the answer at tackle. But I'm not going to go with Peter Skoronski. I'm going to go with Paris Johnson Jr. for the Jags. I think he's positionally versatile, and he's literally the biggest guy of the top tackles. This would be the 3rd Ohio State player off the board in the top 11, equaling Alabama. He played left tackle in 2022 at Ohio State and right guard in 2021. So I like that he could potentially play another position, although you're hoping he can just play left tackle and sort of just forget about it. Despite playing a new position this year, though, still was one of the very best offensive linemen in college football. I remember reading on Twitter earlier this season that he hasn't allowed a sack since 2020, which was like a streak of over 600 snaps played without allowing a sack. So Trevor Lawrence's blind side would be secure, I think, for years to come, as he is the face of the franchise, and you have to keep him upright. You don't want him getting beat down like Joe Burrow and some other quarterbacks have been, so this will be a nice pick. At number 12, the Browns have Deshaun Watson, so that means Houston will be taking their selection in the first round for years to come, and this is another premium pick for Houston to get a real good player. At number 1, of course, I had them taking their new franchise quarterback in Bryce Young, so they can look around at some different cornerstone pieces now. Nick Caserio, I would say, has done a good job in his first 2 years down there in Houston, drafting Derek Stingley, who appears to be a total stud like he appeared to be as a freshman at LSU in 2019. Dameon Pierce looks like a stud as well. They don't really need a left tackle because they have Tunsil. They need more receivers on offense, and I think the last huge upside player on the board would be Quentin Johnston of TCU. I think he can be an A.J. Brown type of player. He's 6'4", 215, and physically is a beast. His kind of profile at wide receiver can really help the Texans, especially in the red zone. Bryce Young would probably love to have a guy like that to throw to, along with Brandon Cooks and his old Bama teammate John Mechie. Quentin has 13 touchdowns overall in his 3 years in college, but he's still a player who's projected to get better and better as time goes on. So I think the Texans, they still have a ways to go, but they're collecting some nice pieces here if they can get a dude like this and they can develop him into what people think he can be. The Steelers are 13th, and they could use a lot. They could use a new offensive coordinator too, but you can't draft one of those. So I think they need offensive line still, just like they did 2 years ago, just like last year. Peter Skoronski is still surprisingly on the board right now, and he would immediately help out that Steelers run game with Najee and their pass blocking for their young quarterback they just picked in Kenny Pickett. I do wonder, though, if Pittsburgh will actually address the offensive line with a premium pick, because it's been an issue for a while now, like I said, going all the way back to the end of Big Ben's career. It's just weird because we think of the Steelers as a model franchise, but you would be sorely mistaken to follow what they've been doing in recent years. I think they need to turn it around soon, and getting this guy to be their left tackle would be positive. He's at Northwestern, so he knows all about that Big Ten football, which is what he's going to be faced with in the AFC North. Basically, a lot of boxes get checked there for me, so let's move on to number 14, where we have the Packers, who, let's just be honest, they haven't been that good this year. But with a top 15 pick, that's something they're not used to the last 25 years or so. And now this would be a chance to improve that roster so that they can compete for the division again. The defense has been middle of the road this season, and the offense has been below average. So I think adding a difference maker, especially at tight end here with Michael Mayer, would be basically a huge boost to the middle of the field, and really you could open up this Packers offense. He's always going to have a good matchup in the pass game going up against linebackers. They could also probably run some new packages and stuff on offense with a tight end who's a legitimate threat. All of a sudden you can run, play action bootlegs, and those are kind of just free yards out there. You can run those stretch zone plays that Matt LaFleur and his offense like to run. He's had a really good season for Notre Dame, and so I think this would actually be a steal for the Packers to get a player this good in the middle of round 1. 15th are the Seattle Seahawks, and they're going to be making their second pick here in the first round after getting their franchise quarterback in CJ Stroud. The offense in Seattle has actually been better this year after Russell Wilson left, which was surprising maybe, but also says a lot. So my attention is definitely on fixing up their defense here, which is near the bottom of the league in points allowed. I think they are 29th as of this recording, so they desperately need another corner. And the good news here is that there are plenty of good ones to choose from. If you go by the model they've gone with in the past, the Seahawks like those big, tall, long corners like a Richard Sherman, and you could go down the list over the years. Even now, Tariq Woolen, he's been a revelation this year as a rookie, 5th round pick. He was 6'4". So I think a sensible pick here could be Christian Gonzalez from Oregon. He's 6'2", 200 pounds. That's actually the tallest of the remaining corners here left on the board. And not only that, he does take the ball away, which is obviously something you would like your cornerback to be able to do. 4 picks this year, 2022. He's already familiar with playing in the Northwest, and I think the Seahawks will be comfortable with this as they acquire another boundary corner, and that means they can now focus on improving the rest of that defense because there's still definitely work to be done. On to 16th now, which is my team, the Patriots. It's always really hard to predict what they're going to do. In my mind, it feels like they always want to draft defense in this spot or trade down. No one really knows. This offseason, they're going to have a ton of cap space. I believe it's $56 million, which is top 5 in the league right now at this point. So they have some room to really improve this roster before 2023. Aguilar, I would say, probably won't be re-signed. McCourty and Slater are both probably retiring. And then John Jones and Jacoby Myers are free agents that I would say they definitely need to keep. If you look at the defense, they don't really need a pass rusher. Judon's leading the league in sacks last I checked. And Josh Uche has broken out this year in year 3. So he's got over 10 sacks as well. They do have 3 corners named Jones that are all good in their own respect, so I'm not sure they'll be drafting another one this year. 2 of them are rookies. Maybe they would to replace Jalen Mills. I mean, you can never have enough good DBs. So yeah, I just don't think there's a ton of need on defense right now. So I'm looking to the offensive side of the ball. I know people always like to project a wide receiver to the Patriots. I've seen that a million times, and that's because people always view their wide receiver group as not having a number 1, and they almost never actually end up going down that route. As a Pats fan, I've noticed actually that like the last decade or so, they actually tend to go after wide receivers in free agency instead of the draft. So the narrative about the Patriots can't draft wide receivers, it's a little wrong because there's very few high draft picks they've spent on that position. Yeah, you can point to N'Keal Harry recently, but over the course of a long period of time, it's been a lot of later round picks. Whereas free agent wide receivers, they've actually had a lot of success with, honestly, going all the way back to Wes Welker. So at 16, I don't think they'll be drafting a receiver if they go offense. I think the O-line actually has been an issue this year between protection and penalties. So this would be a good opportunity to move on from Isaiah Wynn, who was rumored to be on the trade block at the deadline, and try to get better up front. I think Broderick Jones from Georgia could be a player they pick to be the new left tackle. That would mean Trent Brown can move back to right tackle, and you add a guy who's played over 1,200 snaps the last 2 years for Georgia and only allowed 2 sacks, and they were both in 2021. Allowed no sacks so far in 13 games in 2022. So that pick makes a lot of sense to me based on everything I just talked about as something the Pats would do, and it's something they need to fix as well. So I think this is a decent pick for them. On to 17, where the Jets have had a good season so far, but I think that's in large part due to their defense playing well. I have a feeling they're probably going to be looking for a quarterback again in coming years, but for now, I think the offensive line is a big area that needs improvement. They will get some guys back off IR next year, but I think adding a big piece in the draft would help whoever the quarterback is. I think the best O-lineman left here on the board is Osiris Torrance from Florida, who was the best guard in the entire country this year. He was a first-team All-American along with Paris Johnson and Peter Skoronski. One of the few bright spots, I would say, on a Gators team this year, and he was a transfer from Louisiana following Coach Napier to the SEC and absolutely killed it in his first year there. So he's 6'5", 347 pounds, and played right guard for them. Allowed 0 sacks in 3 years of football now, which is over 2,000 snaps played. He's only allowed 1 hit on the quarterback in 3 years if you look at his stats. So extremely impressive there, and the Jets would be getting a very consistently great player here. 18th overall, the Lions are another team making their second first-round pick after selecting Jalen Carter at 4th overall. To me, the Lions still really need a corner. Jeff Okudah showed a little bit to start the year, but even if he's able to keep it that way, I still think they need a corner, maybe more than that. Jeff Okudah showed a little bit to start the year, but even if he's able to keep it that way, I still think they may need a corner or maybe more than that. And like I said, there's several good ones to choose from here in this first round. They could go the free agency route and just sign a true number one corner that way. I don't know. I do know that if they pick Joey Porter Jr. out of Penn State, they would be getting a really good player who definitely has a swag about his game. He's a big guy who's 6'2", 200 pounds, obviously the son of former Steelers linebacker Joey Porter, so he's got that name recognition going for him. I just think the Lions need a guy like this with attitude who's not going to hesitate to go up against a Justin Jefferson who's in the division, or anyone else for that matter. No interceptions this year. In 2022, only has one in 3 years of college football, but he'll play in the box as a run defender, make a tackle. I think there's a lot to like about him and his potential. So here we go now at 19, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the first slot where a playoff team will pick in this draft. Now, I will say, as a Pats fan and a Brady fan, I know the Patriots and Buccaneers teams pretty much top to bottom. I would say better than every other team in the league. This team obviously has a lot of problems this year, and I could make a whole video on that would last 2 hours. As for the players, there are parts of this team that need to get better for sure. The O-line has been rough all year, but they've also had injuries. But I think I'm going to look at defense for this pick. 2 of their top 3 corners in Jamel Dean and Sean Murphy-Bunting are free agents after this season, and I think Dean will be the one who gets re-signed. That means you don't have a slot cornerback anymore, and I don't think they want to permanently move Winfield there because they have been playing him in the slot this year. He's obviously better as a free safety, but at times, yeah, he can play that nickel spot and be a playmaker because he's closer to the line of scrimmage. However, though, when they do that, the 2 safeties behind Winfield are going to be Logan Ryan, who's still pretty good, and then Keanu Neal, who struggles. So to sort all of that out on defense, they could go ahead and pick Clark Phillips III here out of Utah to be their new nickel cornerback, and that would mean they can leave Winfield back at safety more often. Phillips is a versatile guy who has a really impressive college resume. He started as a freshman, got better each of his 3 years, and became unanimous first-team All-American in 2022. Also a team captain, so he's a leader. 6 picks this year, including 4 touchdowns, which is wild. He's the highest-rated commit ever at Utah. The knock would be that he's only 5'10", which Bucs fans will sort of have PTSD about because of Vernon Hargreaves and him being like 5'10" as well. But Antoine Winfield is 5'9", and he's been a great player, so honestly, I don't think it's a big deal. He's just been a wonderful football player that the Bucs could really use on their defense, and he's one of those players that every single team should want. I would want the Pats to take him. So I'm not sure if Tampa would go this route at 19, but I think this would be a pretty wise move to make. 20th are the Tennessee Titans, and this is a tough one for me to pick. They could definitely pick a wide receiver, although it's a heavy run team. They could snag a pass rusher or another cornerback. They've picked a DB actually in either the first or the second round 3 years in a row now, and I actually think it's going to continue again. Still on the board is Cam Smith from South Carolina, and I think the Titans take him here at 20. I don't think he had the greatest season, but he can potentially be another really good NFL player at cornerback coming out of South Carolina in recent years. Think J.C. Horn, and then think back to Stephon Gilmore almost a decade ago. Washington picks 21st, and they're having a better season than people may have thought when they initially traded for Carson Wentz. I thought this wouldn't go well and that we might be seeing Sam Howell sooner than later. Turns out that's not true. We're seeing Taylor Heineke once again. But they do have some good players on this team. 3 pretty nice receivers in Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, and Jahan Dotson. Chase Young and some other good D linemen from Bama. Actually, their starting 4 on the D-line are all first-round picks, former first-round picks. I know in 2021, the defense wasn't very good despite the names you see on paper. And in 2022, they are better in terms of points allowed. So you'd look to the offense on this team and say, well, they're not performing as well as the defense this year, so they need to draft more on that side of the ball. However, I think Ron Rivera likes him some defense and will take this opportunity to draft another defensive piece by getting the best available linebacker in this class all the way down here at 21. I know it's not exactly their biggest need, but I could see it happening. The Chargers have the 22nd pick, and we all know they can't stop the run, so this big board here actually breaks nicely for LA. Brian Bresee from Clemson has surprisingly slipped all the way down to this point, and I think this is where it stops. And if I'm being honest, I'm not sure that this will actually happen. He'll probably get picked a long time before 22. But yeah, if this happens, the Chargers can pick a guy who probably deserves to go in the top 10, but again, that's just how this mock fell for me. Don't come after me, guys. It's nothing personal. I'm just trying to make picks that fit for each of these teams. Brian Bresee is 6'5", 300 pounds, and he'll play inside on the D-line, which is exactly what this defense needs, besides getting healthy and maybe another linebacker. So if something like this plays out, every analyst out there would be giving the Chargers an A for this pick. Miami would have the 23rd pick, but they're cheaters, so they forfeit their selection, and the Giants are now on the clock here at 23. They started out this year like 6-1, if I remember right, under Brian Daboll, who I know is a good coach. He was like the Patriots tight end coach and then was at Bama. And now on a mainstream level, people are seeing him as the Giants head coach doing a great job this year. But after that hot start, they've come back down to earth, and I actually don't think this roster is that great. I think the 6-1 was a bit of a mirage. Offensive line is still a problem despite Andrew Thomas playing great. They have a bunch of solid like wide receiver 2s and 3s, but not really a wide receiver 1. Kenny Golladay has been just straight up stealing money from this franchise. Saquon has returned to good form. Daniel Jones is what he is. So Giants may be looking at quarterback here. Defense has a couple bright spots, but I really think they could use a DB, specifically a corner. Again, I think there's several very talented first-round corners that they could pick from in this draft, and I think the Giants would be wise to get one here. I think it needs to be an outside corner, so I'm going to go with Devin Witherspoon from Illinois, who has put his name into the first-round pick conversation. He had 3 picks, no touchdowns allowed this year. Just a 25 passer rating allowed on the season, which is excellent. He played about as well as you can, and even though he played mostly outside, he did have some snaps in the slot, so he could come in and help the Giants, I believe. Illinois was a team that I don't know what their win total projection was, but they definitely overachieved this year. So guys like this playing well, they contributed to that record, and so I think he's deserving of a top 25 pick here to New York. Ravens are up next at 24, and they have a couple important corners, linebackers, and pass rushers about to hit the market this offseason. Marcus Peters, Kyle Fuller, Justin Houston, Roquan Smith, and even JPP. Who knows which of these guys they'll re-sign and who they'll let walk. So while yes, this defense does give up a lot of big plays in the pass game, I do think they have some talent in the secondary. You got Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Williams, and then Kyle Hamilton, who was a top 15 pick last year. I think they'll want to address their future in terms of pass rush here. They let Matt Judon walk a few years ago, and he's been killing it with the Pats. So I think they will choose one of the few edge rushers that are still atop the board right here. There's actually quite a few, and they can grab any of the ones that they like. I'm going to go ahead and guess that it will be Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame, although I will admit that this is a pretty hard one to choose. All of these guys are really good, but Foskey, he's impressive size-wise, 6'5", 265. He's registered double-digit sacks each of the past 2 seasons as part of a pretty good Notre Dame defense. Hasn't really missed a game in the past 3 years. He just checks a lot of boxes and has the production behind him. So this would be a really solid pick, classic pick for Baltimore. Denver is picking 25th, and let's just be honest, they have a horrific offense. One of the things I heard recently actually watching Red Zone was this 2022 Broncos offense is scoring less points per game than the 0-16 Browns from a few years ago. And that's after they traded for Russell Wilson and are paying him a ton of money. So there's no way internally the Broncos expected to be this horrendous this year. And they can't even pick in the top 3 like they should be because they gave Seattle that pick. I mean, if you think about it, they easily could have just kept Drew Lock, been horrible just like they are now, and used that top 3 pick on, CJ Stroud. How much better would the outlook of the Broncos be if that's actually what happened? But it's whatever. They get what they deserve. The defense this year is top 3 in points allowed, and the offense is 32nd. So I think we all know where they need to be looking. I don't think their skill positions on offense are particularly any good, honestly, outside of Judy and Javonte, but that's not where we're going to go here. Taking a look at their upcoming free agents, they apparently have 5 tackles hitting the market. Yes, 5 tackles. So we've got a few on the board here, but I'm going to pass over this one and go for the BYU man, Blake Freeland, and let me explain why. He's played at left tackle and right tackle for BYU, only allowed 1 sack in 3 years. That's very impressive to go along with the fact that he's 6'8", 305. So he could potentially be a really nice player if he replicates that elite level of play in Denver. Picking 26 are the Cows, who are top 7 in scoring offense and defense this year. A little bit surprising to me. I thought they would actually tick down a little bit as a team this year, but they've actually gotten better. So one of the top rosters in the NFL, and they just need to maintain that going forward now. Best player available would make sense here, almost as a luxury pick. I believe the offense has 3 wide receivers going into free agency: Noah Brown, T.Y. Hilton, and James Washington, and they never really replaced losing Cedric Wilson and Amari Cooper last offseason. So I think taking Jordan Addison in this spot will give Dak another legit weapon outside of CD, who's a stud, as well as Michael Gallup. They've got a good group of 3 running backs, and the O-line is still fine for now, so this is exactly what I would do. Addison, he transferred from Pitt to USC in 2022 to play with Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams. Not bad. Played in the slot and outside. He's got 3 years of pretty good production. 2021 at Pitt had 1,593 yards, so basically 1,600 and 17 touchdowns. Managed about half of that this season at USC, but still, I think he's a potential stud that you could be getting here near the end of round 1 for Dallas. Picking 27th are the reigning AFC champion Bengals. This is another team that's top 10 in both scoring offense and defense, so not a ton to fill on this roster. I think they'll be looking to shore up some of their potential free agent losses, which, obviously everybody does. I think D-line and linebacker are pretty good on this team, and I know both starting safeties, Jesse Bates and Von Bell, as well as Eli Apple and Trey Flowers, are all free agents, so some sort of DB would definitely help because they aren't keeping all of those guys. You would think let Eli Apple walk and then draft his replacement. Offensive line still needs to be upgraded, in my opinion, despite the offseason moves, but I don't see an obvious player here at this point for them to take. They may try to do that in free agency again. So for me, I could see Cincinnati taking Garrett Williams to play outside cornerback along with Awuzie on the other side when he comes back. Mike Hilton is their slot corner, and so he could replace Eli Apple, and then everything fits together nicely once again. Just got to re-sign those safeties. Williams, though, plays at Syracuse, and he's 6 foot, 190, played for 3 years, and he's a good player, so this would be a nice addition for Houday. 28th is where the final 4 teams begin, and here are the Chiefs, the squad that is first in offense despite losing Tyreek Hill to a trade, but below average on defense, so that's what I would be worried about improving if I was Andy Reid. The Bills and the Bengals are their top competition in the AFC right now, so with both of those teams possessing elite quarterback wide receiver combos, you're going to need to defend that some way. You're going to want to be better than 20th on defense to keep making those Super Bowl runs. And the Chiefs actually have a ton of free agents this year, so maybe there will be more turnover on this roster than you would see in a usual offseason. That makes me think this pick could go a number of ways, like position-wise, including an offensive pick maybe. The O-line I would say is pretty good. Maybe a running back could be in play here, but I'm not really confident about that. On defense, Chris Jones is a stud. The DBs actually aren't bad. I think the front 7 would be the most likely thing that would be in play here. So I'm going to have KC taking Felix Anadike Uzama from K-State, despite them being top 5 in the league in sacks. There's just several really good rushers out here on the board right now, and I just don't think they'll pass it up. He's 6'4", 255, 21 sacks in a little bit over 50 hurries the past 2 seasons, with pretty much out without missing a game. So he's been a force for Kansas State. If you watch them, you can't help but notice how impactful he is. So I think he's deserving of a first-round pick, and he's going to end up here on one of the best franchises in the NFL here in recent times. 29th are the 11-3 Minnesota Vikings, who just completed the largest comeback in NFL history against the Colts. I don't think they're as good as their record shows, but credit to them for winning these games and owning the division pretty much wire to wire this year. The obvious need the Vikings should be looking at here is defense, since they're ranked like 28th. Offense will be fine as long as they're healthy. They could use a corner, even though Pat P has been playing far better than expected this season. He's obviously not the long-term answer, though, no matter what he's doing right now. He's 32 years old, and he's a free agent after this year. They might even need to flood the position because at least the front 7 has some talent in there. A player that makes a lot of sense to me here would be the corner here, Emmanuel Forbes out of Mississippi State. Had an excellent season, 6 picks and 3 touchdowns, only allowed 250 yards on the season and allowed a passer rating of 44. So a lot to like there. Takes the ball away and doesn't give up a ton. Size is fine. I think it's 6 foot, 180. So the Vikings could use a player like this. And if I remember correctly, wasn't Martin Emerson from the Browns from Mississippi State as well? Mississippi State can produce some pretty good corners the last couple years. All right, on to the Super Bowl teams now, where the Bills are the first up, picking 30th. They're near the top of the league in many areas. Defense is pretty excellent all around. Offense, same thing. I think maybe they could pick Antonio Johnson, the safety from A&M, because although Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde are both excellent, they are both 31, and Poyer is a free agent. This could be a chance to get ahead of the curve pretty much and get the next guy in there before it's too late and start developing on him. At 6'3", 195, he's pretty tall for a safety, and he'll play all around. He's probably projected to go higher than this, and he might, so maybe the Bills look at, I don't know, Jordan Battle from Alabama if they want to go safety. But yeah, this is my pick for now. I think it could be a good move for them. The last pick in the first round is Philadelphia here at 31, and I know if you guys have been watching this video the whole time, you guys are probably losing your minds about these top two names on the board here. Philly have the best record in the NFL this year, and they're sort of a juggernaut. We'll see how the playoffs go. But as I mentioned back up at number 9, they have 5 D linemen who are upcoming free agents along with 3 DBs. We already addressed corner with Keely Ringo from Georgia, and would you look at that? Another Georgia player falls to them who should have gone much higher. So I don't think they'll pass up on Nolan Smith there. He's the last pick in the first round. He only played 8 games this year, so his production is a little bit behind, but Philly do the double dip on Georgia players once again, just as they did last year by drafting Jordan Davis and then stealing Nakobe Dean later on in the 3rd round. That would make 4 players from Georgia's national championship defense in Philly. So I think Howie Roseman is a good GM. Doesn't have to be Nolan Smith, but if a player that good falls to them, I wouldn't be surprised if he picks them. But that's going to do it. That's my entire first round NFL mock draft for 2023. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I'll probably do this again soon since these are pretty fun. And like I said, a lot is going to change over the next couple months. So thank you for watching. Let me know where you agree and disagree. That'll be interesting. I know there are several names that ended up not going in my first round. It is what it is. I know I'll change my mind about these things as time goes on. So happy holidays, everyone, and I'll have more for you soon.